there will be hours and hours of citizen protest and public speaking and getting up to the mic and telling your elected officials why you don't want this. And then as soon as the public comment portion is over, all the representatives just vote yes, right to their faces. I'm over here using the cloud to store all my photos and videos. Do you know how many years behind I am in organizing my photos and videos and even going through them to see which ones I want to keep? I mean, we're almost at a decade here, and that's how much I'm storing. So, of course, I have to keep upgrading the amount of storage that I have, which is only increasing my dependence on these dystopian data centers. I honestly don't even know what I have in the cloud at this point. I bet it's a lot more than I think. These people who bought homes, okay, with indoor plumbing, all right, it's 2026, we have indoor plumbing. These people are having to fill up buckets of water to flush their toilets. They have like little drippy streams coming out of their faucets, and they're just expected to live that way because the data center is using so much water that their water supply is that much less. This is my thought experiment segment. Just to think through the worst case scenario. You do that in your spare time, right? Okay. Maybe we'll never need it, right? Hopefully. We might never need it. We may or may not be headed into a dystopian surveillance state that'll be able to shut off your access to money, food, water, power, and your ability to travel. May or may not. Oh gosh, this could be a long one. Did you guys know about all these data centers that we're getting? I did not. I knew of them. I knew there were some here and there. Didn't really know exactly what they were, but I had no idea how many were actually planned for or already built in the US. Also, I know this is probably bad, but new technology kind of escapes me sometimes. Okay, I'm just a person. But I had no idea how much I was actually already using these things. Apparently, there's no cloud. Who knew? I have put it together now that if I'm not storing something on my computer, then it's in the cloud. There's no cloud. It's just dystopian nightmare centers being placed all over the United States. We have a serious problem here, and we're going to talk about all the costs, financial and otherwise, being reported by real people across the country who are having these things placed in their backyards. We'll also talk about why I think we're getting them, my unhinged predictions and questions, and of course, how we can live in this timeline and still cultivate hope, because this is Hopefully Ever After, where we philosophize about what's coming and prioritize responding with truth, goodness, and beauty. Okay, so my first thought about these data centers popping up all over the country, and I mean all over. Okay, we have 50 states, and we're getting over 4,000 data centers. Some people say over 5,000. Maybe it depends on what map you look at. I'm not sure. But my first thought is that no one asked for this. Okay, nobody asked for these things to be put into their towns. But I think that's only partially right, because we did sort of ask for it. Like I said earlier, I've been surprised to learn how much I'm actually using the tech and these services to store all of my stuff that uses these data centers, and I didn't even realize it. I'm over here using the cloud to store all my photos and videos. Do you know how many years behind I am in organizing my photos and videos and even going through them to see which ones I want to keep? I mean, we're almost at a decade here, and that's how much I'm storing. So, of course, I have to keep upgrading the amount of storage that I have, which is only increasing my dependence on these dystopian data centers. I honestly don't even know what I have in the cloud at this point. I bet it's a lot more than I think. So in a way, we did ask for it. But as usual, we were hoodwinked by the people at the top who probably rolled out all of these services intentionally, getting people hooked on them, getting people depending on them, right? For like your family. How important is it for you to keep your family photos, right? And all these things that are like very sentimental, and you don't have physical copies of them anymore because not that many people are having these pictures actually printed. We're just storing them eternally. So we've been rolling out these new features and using them to store, to stream, to research, to whatever. And now that has allegedly necessitated this rollout of server power that has to be scattered across the landscape of this country. I'm not sure if I buy that we're going to be using everything they're building. Like we need that much just for private use, but I guess that remains to be seen. And I consider myself to be sort of in the know about things. Obviously, not in the know about technology. Okay. I admit that readily, but in the know for current events, like what's going on around here. I keep up with those things, especially these things that I think are going to lead us to, the destruction of society. I like to keep up with that stuff. And I've been seeing videos pop up here and there on YouTube, probably for a year at least. People talking about what they're gonna do. They're concerned about water usage and all these things, but it has not been any sort of really emergency type feeling about it. I mean, they sounded terrible to live next to, but in my mind, I think it sounded really far away. You know how some things do, they just seem like they're not really going to affect you in a big way. And so they seemed really far away, seemed like, oh, they'll build these out, not even in rural spaces, but in uninhabited spaces. In my mind, I think that's what I thought was going to happen. But then I heard that we have some family who lives nearby us, 30 minutes away, that they might be getting one in their backyard. And this is that family's forever dream home. And so I was devastated for them that they have to go try and stop this from happening now. And I mean, this week it has blown up, but I've been seeing all over social media, all over YouTube, hundreds and hundreds of people going to their city council meetings, protesting these things, trying to get their elected officials to vote no and not to bring these things to their communities. And it is incredible to watch. There will be hours and hours of citizen protest and public speaking and getting up to the mic and telling your elected officials why you don't want this. And then as soon as the public comment portion is over, all of the representatives vote yes, right to their faces. No consideration at all. And I'm like, I hope someone is looking into whether or not you're being bribed or threatened or something, because that seems pretty insane to me. And then I find out how many of these things are actually operational around the world already, and then also how many more are being planned for. And I'm just wondering how we all missed this until now. Like, this is a huge project to get this many of these humongous projects going, get the construction on board, get all the approvals, right? How long does it take to get approvals to do construction projects, to do environmental studies? Didn't we used to care about that stuff? I remember caring about that stuff a whole lot. So if you're new to this too, if this is news to you and you're like, why wouldn't I want to live next to one? You're like, what's the problem? Well, I'll just give you an example. In Memphis, Tennessee, Elon Musk built an AI data center. There's a local news report you can find on YouTube that featured residents who live near it, and they're talking about some pretty terrible developments in their area since it's been built. And of course, no one cares. No one who's there who can do anything about it. And apparently, Elon Musk also doesn't care. But these people are reporting things like smelling gas frequently outside. Like if you were to leave your stove on, and you smell the gas in your house, they're smelling that all over outside. People developing respiratory illnesses like chronic bronchitis and asthma and COPD. So that's the first time I've seen those things. But the most common complaints out there from people who live next to these are higher water bills, higher electric bills, huge tax subsidies for these companies who are building them from the states, because of course the regular people in their communities are not going to benefit from this. They're benefiting from this deal, but the corporations are. The state is trying to bring them in and giving them all these tax breaks, and the people aren't getting any of that. Lots of decreased water pressure. It is crazy. These people who bought homes, okay, with indoor plumbing, all right, it's 2026. We have indoor plumbing. These people are having to fill up buckets of water to flush their toilets. They have like little drippy streams coming out of their faucets, and they're just expected to live that way because the data center is using so much water that their water supply is that much less. Or they have well water and their well water is then contaminated. There is light pollution at night because all the lights are on at the plant all the time. And one of the worst things I think is noise pollution. I am a person where if somebody leaves our DVD player on in the living room, we do still use a DVD player. We use it all the time. I love it. If that gets left on and there's like a very quiet little hum I walk into the living room and I'm like, DVD player's on. I can hear that and it bothers me. So these people living in these places where these centers are emitting this constant low humming sound that is going for miles through their houses. People are talking about anxiety being triggered by it, losing sleep in their own homes, having to move their families to the basement to sleep, or having to wear noise canceling headphones to sleep. Can you imagine doing that every night? How is this legal? Why are these huge corporations allowed to come in and lower the quality of life for the people who already live there? They bought their houses or built their houses and settled into these communities well before these data centers were planned. So this has me raging inside, like all the things that are just so blatantly corrupt and unfair to the average citizen who now has to either just live like that or find a way to go fight it, okay, in their small communities while they're working and paying bills and raising kids and doing, just living their lives. Now they got to dedicate like another part-time job number of hours to fight these huge corporations who are coming in because their own state is trying to bring them in and give them millions of dollars in tax breaks so that they can be part of this AI bubble that's happening right now. Stuff like that just makes me so mad. And geographically speaking, a lot of these places that they're building these in don't even have the water or electrical grids and systems to support them. For example, in Texas, there are 458 data centers either planned or already built. Do you guys remember a few years ago when Texas got that huge ice storm and their electrical grids failed so spectacularly that they were in the news for weeks about it and people's pipes were bursting all over their homes? I do. Do you remember how the entire western half of the United States is on fire constantly in the summer because it's so dry? Where are they going to get this electricity and water from? They're already telling people, I just saw yesterday, there's a headline that people in Lake Tahoe or living around there have been told to find another source of electricity because it's going to go to the data center. Excuse me? I have to find another source of electricity? So I know common sense isn't too common anymore. And I'm not sure it even really matters because even if there was common sense, it will be overridden by corruption every single time. Even if they do make these grids more robust or they find ways to get the water that they need, I am pretty confident that the companies are not going to be the ones footing the bills for these things. It's going to be the people, like it always is. Any of us who are unlucky enough to live wherever these monstrosities are going to be built are going to have their clean water, air, electricity, and sanity stolen from them, as well as their home's value, because how do you sell a home under those conditions, especially when these data centers are not creating the jobs that they say they're creating? They're only creating jobs for the construction portion. And after that, they only need like a few dozen people to run them and maintain them. They're not going to create sustaining jobs that are going to, be this economic boom for all the areas that they're being built in. And one of my favorite podcasters, Baron Coleman, cleared this up for me a little bit. This idea of, well, people are like, I'm okay with people with people making money. That's a good thing. It's capitalism. Well, it's not really. If we were living under true capitalism, these companies would be paying the citizens that live around these centers for the rising bills that they're going to get, for the lowered quality of life that they're going to get, tainted water supply, the lowered home values. Capitalism would put citizens in the same position they were in before these companies showed up. Barron calls it the but for argument. So, but for you moving in here, my quality of life would be the same. So if it's not, then you need to be compensated for that. But that's not what's happening. These companies are denying that these things are happening. They're not helping the people that they're moving in next to. They want to be good neighbors, but they are not. Okay. Their actions do not match their words. So they're socializing the cost and they're privatizing the profit. Does that sound familiar? Like maybe what they do with healthcare and the war industry, right? Like we know this playbook. So beyond the current issues that are at hand, we need to be thinking about the potential future impacts of these things, regardless of where we live. I don't know about you, but since I'm such an optimistic, trusting person, it took me a long time to learn to see reality as it really is and not how it is presented to be. And this is a very good example of a situation that needs deeper scrutiny than they want us to give to it. So far, as we've determined by the universal experiences of the humans that live around these things, I think we can safely surmise that they are physically antithetical to human flourishing and productive civilization. So the question we have to ask is why? Why are we doing this? Why are we jumping straight into this new way of life, into this new era of technology and civilization mixing, and how are we going to do this? Why are we jumping straight into this and just going straight to building thousands of these all across the country without so much as a national conversation? There's no conversation happening between our leadership and citizens. There's no fireside chats, with Trump coming out and saying, hey, so we have this idea. What do you guys think about it? Here are all the benefits. Here's what might be some challenges, but here's how you're going to benefit from it. We don't have that. And these things are everywhere. This should be a global conversation. They're in Ethiopia. Okay. When I looked at the maps of data centers, they're in Ethiopia. Do you remember in the 90s when we would learn anything about Ethiopia and it was just like, oh my gosh, it's just like a dirt pile, I'm sure that some of that was propaganda, but how would I know? I'm learning out of Ghislaine Maxwell's dad's textbooks. So supposedly we're headed towards a totally new era of life on Earth, and all we get are tech bros giving interviews where they either intentionally or accidentally spill the beans on what their real thoughts and intentions are with these things. And then we're just left to make of it what we will. Or you're left to never even find out about it, depending on your algorithm. So if we're asking why, there's some possibilities. Is it really just money? Is it really just a banal gold rush where investors are just willing to risk the stability of society to make a buck before the AI bubble pops? And it's not worth anything anymore? Some people say that. Some people say, we're really not going to use this technology and people are going to reject it and, the bubble's going to pop. And I hope that's true, but it doesn't feel like it is. Is it just inevitability? Is it really inevitable that this is just the way of the world now? Did it have to be? Could we have decided together not to store every photo that we ever take on our phone in the cloud? Like if I had known the consequences of that, would I have said, maybe I don't really need all of these. Maybe I could print them out and just hope that I never lose them, instead of holding on to these things that I might not even ever look at again. Could we decide not to ask Grok 30 questions a day per person? That's an option too. If it meant holding us back in this step, would we have decided those things if it had been a conversation? Or is it inevitable that the elite class that's making these decisions will accomplish this level of power and control no matter what 99.9% of us want out here? I wish I didn't think that it was inevitable, but I think I do. And maybe that's obvious. Maybe it's obvious that it's inevitable, but I still think it's important to ask the question so that blame can be assigned accordingly because blame is not assigned accordingly in a lot of history. And I think going forward with AI, any history that is only recorded digitally will be rewritten to something that is more positive for the people who got us to the place that we're in, or the place that we will be, decades down the road. Okay. So here's where my thinking gets pretty dark, but I hope you stay with me until the end. As you may know by now, if you've watched multiple episodes, I can't just be normal. I can't just put on a fake smile and say, I believe everything is always going to be okay. And I believe that life is always going to be the same on Earth as it is now. Um, History does not suggest this at all. If you look back at any era of human history, um, it is nothing like the life that we know right now. And as I said before, I just have always had a feeling like, how long can this go for? How long can this last? I think we've been brainwashed a little bit by this modern life and civilization mindset that we don't need to be considering any future, like any alternative futures, like any alternative future outcomes. And I also think that we're not as civilized as we like to think. I think we are a couple of days of food and water shortage away from finding out how civilized people really are. So anyway, I've been a fan of dystopian novels since I was like a teenager, I think. In 1984, Animal Farm, Brave New World, always liked that kind of stuff. And by fan, I mean, I love that they've been written as a type of warning for us, because deep down, I feel that it is inevitable that humanity will end up in these types of situations at some point. Um, I just think it's a question of when. I wish I didn't. I really wish I didn't. Is that a common thing? Do a lot of people, I know a lot of people feel this way, because I have the internet, so I can see that a lot of people feel this way. If you don't, and you think I'm nuts, and that all of this sounds implausible, I would love to know how. Like, I want you to tell me how, so that I can feel better. Because my pattern recognition is off the charts lately, and I just don't see a way out for humanity. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit coming up, about why that is, because it's pretty weird to be an optimistic person. I just am, but also think that the end of the world is for sure coming. That's just like a weird place to be. But anyway, this next guy reminds me of it. I was watching one of the data center videos recently, and they interviewed a guy who had traveled across the country to get a temporary job building one of these things. He was in construction. And it reminded me of Charles Ingalls. We watch Little House on the Prairie here a lot. Awesome show, by the way. If you missed it, like in the 70s and 80s, my kids love it. Charles would leave, like whenever the farm wasn't doing well or something, he would leave the Little House on the Prairie for a few months and go find some crazy demolition job or something dangerous he could do, and make a bunch of money in a little bit of time. Beside the point. But anyway, this guy moved across the country to build the data center, and he was being interviewed by the news, and this guy said, "Oh yeah, these things are like real 1984 Brave New World Fahrenheit 451 stuff." And I was like, "So, but you're still building it." Okay? But then I was like, I'm still using it, I'm still storing things in the cloud, and I'm still creating demand for these services, right? So I don't know what to do about that, because even doing this podcast creates demand for that. So I don't know. But hearing a regular person say that confirms my belief that a lot of people feel like something is coming in the next few years. And I know we don't talk about that. Like, we don't talk about that at the baseball game. We don't talk about that when we go out to dinner with our friends. We don't talk about, what could be coming in the next few years that maybe is not going to be pleasant. but I do get the vibe that people feel like something is, and I definitely do, and I always have. So, uh, yeah, just hearing that come from anybody else kind of confirms that for me, that there are more of us than I think. And I say that like we haven't already lived through something. We lived through COVID. I mean, that was a good 3 years of, some new level of dystopia, right? I know for me, it was very hard. There was one of those years, and there was easily the worst year of my life, trying to be pressured for my job to take the jab and being concerned about what was coming and what my kids' schools were going to demand and all that stuff. It was terrible. But we already did that. And here I am like, I don't know, do you think something else is coming? Of course it is. Of course it is. And we're still finding out more information about what COVID really even was. Just yesterday, there's a CIA whistleblower testifying in Congress. And I think there's been a lot of people who put a lot of time into investigating what happened behind the scenes, things that people never knew about, and have reported on it. And there's still a lot of people out there who never have even realized what we lived through. So it takes information so long to travel. And I know we have the internet, so it's faster, but we also have our algorithms. So if it's something you're gonna find, you're gonna find it faster. But if it's not in your wheelhouse, you may never find it unless somebody tells it to you, which is wild even to think about on its own. But anyway, even after COVID, right? We're still in the 2020s. It feels like 2020, the year 2020 has been going on for 6 years. I don't think that they're done. I think that was the warm up for the next iteration of, the next Pinky in the Brain scheme where they're going to try to take over the world with something else. Agenda 2030 has never been canceled. You look that up, I think you're going to know more of what I'm talking about. And I used to read that and be like, but how are they going to do it? Well, if we have all these data centers all over the world, I think they have a better shot at accomplishing their goals. So they're still working on that. Our greatest ally is still bulldozing the Middle East. Okay. We're still working on the greatest ally project. You can look that up too. And we're allowing ourselves to be surrounded with enough computing power to track and connect and control all of us at all times. And even if that isn't the stated goal of building these data centers, we're still allowing the first step to be accomplished. They're building the infrastructure that's going to give whoever's in power the power to make it into a digital prison. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who wouldn't think anything of that. Digital prison, what? No way. And but I've also concluded that there are a lot of people who don't see past the end of their nose. No offense, if you just like the way your nose looks and you don't want to look past that, that's fine, but that's what I see. And I think that not worrying about the amount of surveillance and data control that they'll be capable of soon, because they're going to tell us, they're already telling us. Kevin O'Leary, the guy from Shark Tank, he's already telling us we got to compete with China. How long have you been hearing that for? Okay, just like Iran has been close to getting a nuclear weapon for forever, for my whole life. And we got to worry about China all the time too. The same people, by the way, the same people who are telling us, hey, we got to ship all these jobs over to China. It's going to be so good for our economy. Okay, so we did. We shipped all those manufacturing jobs over to China. Now we manufacture nothing. Same people who did that and wiped out so many manufacturing communities and all of these business sectors in the US. Those people are now telling us that we need all these data centers to keep up with AI so that China doesn't beat us in the marketplace. Make that make sense. So anyway, I think that not being worried about what we're giving them the capability to do is just like let's send our daughters on a date with a serial killer because he said he just wants to take her to dinner. How's it different? I stand by that analogy. I do not care what they say their plans are for these AI data centers right now. I don't trust their long-term goals. Don't trust their intentions. And remember, our motto here, the point of this system is what it does. You'll know them by their fruit, as Jesus said. So far, the fruits are ignoring human health issues and needs, ignoring citizen input in the process of approving and building these things, trampling property rights by devaluing the real estate and stealing the resources, polluting our air and water sources, and collecting our data and learning how to behave like us. To me, so far it looks like they only care about people as digital cattle. So what's this system going to do? Supposedly, we live in a democratic republic where we elect people who represent us and make decisions that will benefit us. They're supposed to support the well-being and the flourishing of the communities that we build. Yet what we see with our eyes is these city councils going against the will of the people when they show up in the hundreds to these town meetings. They vote to their faces against their wishes and ram these projects down people's throats. So again, I ask, what is the point of that system? So this week, Tucker interviewed that guy from Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary. He's investing in the biggest data center, I think, in the country, but it's going to be in Utah. It's going to be absolutely massive. And between that interview and the monologue, Tucker brought up a few really good points, and I wanted to add them in here. So, where are the environmental groups? That was a question he asked, and I was like, yeah, where are those guys? Because they, claim to care about everything that has to do with the environment, and nowhere to be found. Haven't heard a peep. So Tucker said, "Oh, that whole thing wasn't a psyop, was it?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh." I think the whole thing was a psyop. They get loud whenever it suits them and they stay quiet when it suits them. Trademark psyop. And here's the darkest part, and I mentioned this earlier, but Tucker brought up the fact that there has been no campaign to try to convince us that this is a good thing. There's no one out there on the news pushing a narrative that our lives are going to be so much better if we just accept this landscape of dystopian neighbors across our fruited plains. There's nobody out there trying to convince us that we need this. And he posited that maybe that's because they don't have to, which is a very scary thought. But I guess now that the country is finally talking about it, I mean, I'm seeing this everywhere now. If they push ahead, with all this chatter, they push ahead without a marketing campaign, then I guess we'll know that they think they have it in the bag no matter what. Similarly, I think it only makes sense that the ruling class is only going to care about polling well and winning elections until they don't have to anymore. When the tools of control are in place and the only people left at the top are the ones who want to use them against the people, it will happen. We'll get to a point in time when the average citizen has no recourse anymore because not only are we out armed, which we already are, but we'll also be afraid of losing access to all the things that we need to survive because it can all be turned off with the click of a button. Who knows how long that'll be? Don't know if it'll be in my lifetime or my kid's lifetime. I don't want any of us dealing with that. But also, I'm even 5 or 6 generations down the road. I don't want my great, 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 great grandkids dealing with it either, I don't want them to live through that. Like I said earlier, I have tended toward being too trusting and naive about human nature for most of my life. But the more I have thought about it, the more I'm like, that makes so much more sense. That the people who get to these positions of power where they're wielding life and death basically over the common person, that they would be like a ruthless person. Okay. I looked up the etymology, like the the roots of the word ruthless because I was like, Ruth. Oh, I've always really liked that name. I almost used it for one of my daughters. And I was like, but that's a name, not a word. So what does that mean? Anyway, looked it up, and Ruth apparently means compassion. To be ruthless is to lack compassion, and also the etymology of the word compassion, it means to suffer with. So if you're going to suffer with someone, that's when you have compassion for them. So it's accurate to describe the people who are deliberately causing suffering in the world for their own gain and are unwilling to ameliorate any of their victims' circumstances, to describe them as being ruthless. Everybody that I know just wants to live their life and raise their families. People like you and me are not looking to dominate other people. I'm not spending my time trying to figure out how to take over the world. But there are plenty of people who are, and apparently they can plan generationally because this is an ongoing issue. So what do we do? This is my thought experiment segment. Just to think through the worst case scenario. You do that in your spare time, right? Okay. Maybe we'll never need it, right? Hopefully, we might never need it. We may or may not be headed into a dystopian surveillance state that'll be able to shut off your access to money, food, water, power, and your ability to travel. May or may not. It might not happen. But let's think through it, just in case. So my first question, is it still possible to remove ourselves from this system? I feel like that'd be pretty difficult at this point. Second question, can trade and bartering make a big enough comeback to keep millions of people alive who will not want to meet the requirements of being part of this new society? Like if I trade you bread for eggs, like, can we keep our families alive if we don't want to do the mark of the beast or the vaccine passport thing? I don't know. It's a question. I used to assume that that's what the option would be. Like you just kind of go underground with your, into an underground market and get what you need, but, and maybe like move out to the woods. Isn't that what everybody wants to do? We all just want to I just want to move out to the woods. That's the expectation of not being found, right? But I also wasn't envisioning swarms of AI powered police drones either. So, this is not something I really anticipated. So I'm kind of having to rework my plan here for how to get out of this. Will there be a possibility of going anywhere to live where you can count on being safe and being exempted from these things that you don't want to participate in? I'm starting to feel like the answer is no, which is disheartening. Because I always just assumed I could move out to the woods. I think we all did, right? Just get a camper. It's fine. I don't care. Okay. So this is the part where we're going to talk about what we can hope in. And I just want to say I'm doing my best here. Okay. This was the type of episode that I think I just needed to get it out of my brain, off my chest, and maybe hopefully we can kind of go up from here. This is sort of like my deepest, darkest thoughts about the future. But that's why I'm doing this, so that I can bring the hope into it. But this segment of hope is not going to feel hopeful, right? It's not going to feel great. It's just going to be real. So doing my best here. We're not at sunshine and rainbows segment. I'll just say that. But it's just like, how joy is different from happiness. You can have joy even in sad circumstances, even if you're not happy at the moment. But hope is like that. Hope is accessible even in the worst circumstances. And there's a lot of good we can do in our lives as long as we're allowing God to work through us. Circumstances are where we find ourselves, but our response to them is what really matters. And I don't think you can really find better examples of living for Christ in the worst of times than in some of the saints' stories. So one of my favorite examples is St. Maximilian Kolbe. He provides a very strong real life example of how to live, like what we've been talking about, to how to live as a prisoner of a dystopian cabal. Okay, he was a Catholic priest who was murdered in Auschwitz by the Nazis. He was murdered in 1941. He had been arrested for sheltering Polish refugees, a lot of whom were Jews, and he had also been publishing media that went against the Nazi regime. He was really into printing, and that was like part of his ministry. So he was arrested, and in Auschwitz, their policy was that if a prisoner escaped, they would kill 10 men who were left in the camp by starvation. So it was a deterrent for people trying to escape. So while he was there, somebody from his barracks escaped, and there was a selection of men chosen to die in the starvation bunker. And one of them was a husband and a father, and he cried out about his family after he was selected. And Father Colby stepped forward and he asked the Nazi commandant if he could take his place. Actually, his offer was accepted, and he traded places with the man. And he was put into the bunker with 9 other prisoners, where he spent his last 2 weeks on Earth singing hymns and encouraging them and praying with them. And he had not died fast enough for the guards after 2 weeks, and they eventually just went into the bunker and injected him with carbolic acid, and then they burned his body. But I'm sure that the guards were confused while he was in there. I'm sure they were confused about why anyone would be singing joyfully, or how anyone in that circumstance could be encouraging to the other people who were in there with him in the midst of all of that torture. And I'm sure that anyone who is not allowed Christ to be the king of their life would also be confused by that. So this is my encouragement for today. Like I said, not sunshine and rainbows. We're not talking about how to get out of anything, get out of any suffering, or, continue to live an easy life if that option is ever gone from us. We're talking about the worst case scenario and how we would respond in that scenario. So my encouragement is that every totalitarian state has at least one thing in common, which is that they hate Jesus Christ and they hate Christians, because we are ultimately ungovernable. If I know that my soul is safe in him, then I know that nothing that happens here on earth is my ultimate end. Heaven is my ultimate goal. And if all I had left were my own thoughts and prayers, they would still be centered on Christ. And that is what makes me free. And that is what can make you free. If you're far from God right now, and it's been a long time since you've prayed or been to church, go. He's waiting. It's never too late, and you are never too far gone to go back to him. Read the story of the prodigal son, and you will see what I'm talking about. Joy isn't the same thing as happiness. It's only found in the hope that's stronger than our circumstances. So go find a way to strengthen that in your own life. I'll be back next week, hopefully with a more positive palate cleanser.